Hello everyone. Welcome to Super Coaching UPSC by Textbook. This is Venkatesh, your faculty for geography. In this session, I'll be discussing about everything which you need about something called as cryosphere. You need to understand in this video what do you mean by cryosphere? What is the consequences of losing cryosphere? How it has a huge role to play in our climate across the world, and how it has significantly we need to study further so that our lives can turn into a better thing, so that we'll understand the impacts of the climate change in a very better way, right? So it's all about understanding about the entire event about climate change. We'll start discussing about that, right? So what do you mean by the word called cryosphere? In fact, the first thing you need to understand, there was once question asked around 5 years ago, where UPSC asked a question about, just a minute. Right. So around few years ago, UPSC has asked a question about cryosphere, where they asked about what do you mean by cryosphere? How does it affect the global climate? Many of the people were surprised because it is part of our syllabus. They could not understand what do you mean by cryosphere itself. Some of the people, it indicates that they are lacuna with respect to understanding of our syllabus. Emphasis on syllabus, I need not tell it once, right? It is, the syllabus is very important. So in the syllabus, changes in critical flora and fauna including ice caps. So in the as part of the syllabus, it clearly talking about critical changes in flora and fauna, including they're also talking about melting of ice and ice caps. So it is part of our syllabus. It is even part of our atmosphere. It is part of our climate. So a question about cryosphere, considering the impact of the climate change and all, it is always in news. So let us understand about what do you mean by cryosphere as such. So cryosphere encompasses about the entire area of ice. The ice part of the world altogether. Ice part of the world altogether is what we call it as cryosphere. So cryo means ice, sphere, the part of the earth. So we all know atmosphere, which is about the air around us. Then we have the biosphere, which is where the life is there, right? We have the hydrosphere, which is the water around us. We have the lithosphere, the rock around us. Similarly, we have the cryosphere, which is the ice around us. Now, what does this cryosphere encompasses? Does it include only the glaciers, the ice which is melting from the Antarctic region and the Arctic region alone? No, it includes the entire ice, whether it is the ground level ice, whether it is the river ice, whether it is the ocean ice, whether it is about the simply snow, anything which is in the form of solid water, that includes cryo ice. Anything which is part of the solid water particles. So you know that water is in the form of solid, liquid, gaseous, water vapor, the gaseous, water, the liquid, and as well as the solid. Now all the solid things associated with water, be it in terms of the sea ice, which you see it is melting, it is floats in the ocean, the icebergs which you have seen in the Titanic movie, right? The lake ice, the river ice. So you also have certain ice. For example, you take river Volga. Volga in the regions of Russia. For around decent time of the months in a year, they are definitely melting. They are definitely in their solid ice because of the latitude they are. So even that is also part of the cryosphere. the snow which will be perpetually snowing, you will be enjoying the snow, right? Such places where when the temperatures are -20, -25, -30, you will be seeing the snowfall falling and you can enjoy such kind of things. So snow cover, that is one. You can talk about the permafrost. Now, this is a new word. What do you mean by permafrost? Anyone? Can you tell me what do you mean by permafrost? Permafrost? Permafrost refers to what? Yes, let me see the comments. Yes, can you tell me anyone? What do you mean by permafrost? Yes, anyone? Okay. So permafrost refers to about the solid or the ice on the ground, say a few meters onto the depth, right? Few meters, solid ice on the ground, right? With including few meters of the depth. So that is the permafrost regions. Such permafrost regions are the regions of the solid ice which is covered for a decent amount of time under ice, the ground covered under completely under ice, which is not at all, there is no melting of such things which you find in the Arctic regions, is called as permafrost. And we all know glacier ice, sea ice moving, just like you have a river, continuous movement of solid ice which you find water, the glaciers move, is called as the glacier ice. Now, for example, you might see that Antarctica is a vast land. Now you can say that, imagine this is the whole Antarctica. Now you see that around the Antarctica region there is so much amount of snowfall which will be falling down, isn't it? Now the snow which gets gradually accumulates around the Antarctica. Now this is an area wise. Now if you talk from the vertical cross section, the surface waves, imagine the snow falling accumulates on the ground level here, and this snow will be transferred to the entire area of the surroundings around the entire Antarctica. By whom? By the glaciers. So even glaciers are also the same kind of thing, isn't it? So you can see the permafrost, the glaciers, you can talk about the ice sheets, you can talk about the ice shelves, you can talk about the solid precipitation, wherever you are finding the solid precipitation, say like the hailstorms which are solid ice up to a certain point alone. Yeah, we have a mix of snow and ice, sleet, snow and water, rain, the sleet, you have the snowfall, and sometimes even the hail. Yes, now we are talking about the peripheral things. This is the periphery. Hail is a periphery because it happens only in the areas where there is more convection, right? That's a tropical, that will be more liquid. But for certain part, it will be solid. But it's a lesser part, but it's a peripheral one. But in general, all the remaining things are the core, where you will find the ice completely, where the earth, the frozen part of the earth is what we call it as a cryosphere. Ice part of the world altogether, or the frozen part of the earth. Now, why we need to study this? The whole important thing about is not just knowing about it. Why we need to study? As the picture is talking about, you can see the mountain glacier, you can see the ice sheet, the ice shelf here, the iceberg, you can see the bedrock. Okay, this is about the glacier, right? The ice sheet, you can see the sea ice which is gradually melting. You can see about the mountain glaciers, the snow line where beyond which there is forever snow. So all such kind of things, you are seeing it, isn't it? Right? So when you talk about all these kind of things, this is the cryosphere. Now, what is its impact on us? Why are you learning this? The reason why are you learning is you have so many associated things about cryosphere. For example, in the last class, in the last week as well, you can go and watch this Thwaites Glacier, the sea level, the things about the Doomsday Glacier I have discussed in the last class. You can check about that. There is a glacier in the Antarctica region called Thwaites, along with the Pine Glacier very needed to it along with this Pine Glacier. The thing with Pine Glacier and Thwaites Glacier, which is covering around this huge area, is here, right? Now, what are things? These are their length is almost around 120 kilometers. These glaciers transfer all the solid ice, which is part of the Antarctica core region in the central part, towards the periphery, into the ocean. Now, this is the glacier which covers so much amount of ice. And what we are trying to understand about this glacier is something called as a glacier's grounding line. You know what is the grounding line of a glacier? When the ice starts melting, as you can see here, ice starts melting. The grounding line, the point where there is the glacier is meeting the ground level, right? And because the water, the solid ice is meeting the ground level is called grounding line. And because of the melting of the glaciers, the water is entering into it. This is what we call it as a retreat of the glaciers. And this retreat of the glaciers is leading to so much kinds of challenges. And because of these challenges, what are you finding is the grounding line, as it moves slowly into the deeper portions of the Antarctic region. I have told you in detail in the previous video. I'm just giving a glimpse here. So as the grounding line goes more into the interiors, this is the base. Now, when the Thwaites Glacier melts, well, similarly associated with the very nearer to it, Thwaites Glacier, the Pine Glacier, when it melts, they are actually the stumbling blocks of the entire ice of this western Antarctica region. So when this melts, that entire ice also will be melting, which will lead to sea level rise. Such things are very, very disastrous for us. So this is one aspect of glacier. Then there is some things what we need to understand about is the catastrophes of cryosphere loss. What are the cryospheres of cryosphere? The catastrophes of cryosphere loss. The global temperature. The global mean temperatures which you are talking about is currently 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial loss. And if the same cryosphere melting is continuing, it will lead to the increase in the temperatures of around 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius as part of the Paris Agreement, and will have the disastrous consequences of sea level rise. So the thing which we are talking about is the sea level rise. As I talk about the grounding line going up, especially in the oceanic regions, similarly, this is what we call glacial shrinkage as well in the regions of mountains, say like Himalayas, the third pole, which we call it as, say the Switzerland Alps here. You see, glaciers in the European Alps have shrunk dramatically, breaking records. The shrinkage of ice in the regions of Switzerland, in the regions of Himalayas, has become a cause of concern across the world, right? Recently, you also have something called snowless Gulmar, which I have done a video. You can type a snowless Gulmar Venkatesh in YouTube, you will get a video, right? Where I have discussed about how the Gulmarg regions of India has been significant lack of snow and how it has a disastrous consequences. So this is the thing about the glaciers again. The Switzerland glacier loss. Switzerland lost 6% of the glacier ice volume from 21-22. Look at the extent of volume loss. And recently, because of this, they have you might heard about in climatology a certain concept called teleconnections. Teleconnections. So what do you mean by teleconnections? Imagine it is like a big connectivity thing. Imagine you talk about the temperatures and the pressures of the whole world. Everything is connected to the other one. If there's a significant variations of temperatures or pressure at one place, it will have an impact of temperatures on the other place. This is what we call it as teleconnections. Such teleconnections can also lead to changes in the climate, rainfall, which might lead to drought. Say in East African drought. Parts of East Africa, including Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia, have experienced severe droughts with humanitarian impacts. What do you mean by humanitarian impacts? You know, these are the regions of Africa which are which are still under the traditional things where the amount of population is still very, 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 very base. What do you say that they are at the pre-industrial level. They don't have the level of communities in terms of education, knowledge, and all are still not high. Here, even now here, the birth rates in terms of population, if you see, the death rates were significantly higher here, even now, because of the continuous famine. So their basic idea of having things like food, cloth, shelter, they're struggling even to get their basic means of food, cloth, shelter. If you see Ethiopian, the East African, droughts, which is leading to famines, lack of availability of food, humanitarian impact is recently in news, right? Countries like Ethiopia and all were recently in news. Such things can be asked. You can talk about similarly the global climatic phenomena of Indian Ocean dipole, the things like variations of El Nino, which can have climatic impact all across the world. So such kind of things are all associated with the basic idea of what? The loss of ice. So somewhere the melting in the regions of say in Russia will have an impact. We living in different corners of India, isn't it? Right? So such things are very, very important to understand as part of the policymaker, so that ultimately you are here to learn about and learn now and implement what can we do for the people at the ground level, right? That is the catastrophe of cryosphere loss. One such cryosphere loss, which I'll discuss, which is having a significant thing, is the permafrost and the methane emissions. You all have seen about the methane. Then what is about the, methane? It is an important greenhouse gas. Important greenhouse gas. Now what is happening is, you have the ground level, right? So this is the land, and this is a land completely under solid ice, which is called it as the permafrost. Now this permafrost is actually covering the entire ground subsurface of the ground of the land with ice. And nowadays what is happening is, when this permafrost melts completely near at the borders of land and the sea, there are some trapped emissions of methane here. What is this? Trapped emissions of, there are some methane deposits which were trapped so many years ago. Now, when this permafrost is melting, this methane is now directly coming up into reaction with respect to the atmosphere, coming up with respect to the reactions in the water, and it is interacting, and this methane emissions are happening now. Now methane, as you all know, it is a greenhouse gas. Because it is a greenhouse gas, what is it leading to? It is leading to increased greenhouse global warming and carbon dioxide formation from methane, and because of that, the global warming is fastening out. So because if it is fastening, the feedback loop which we say it about the cryosphere has been significantly impacted. So what is the thing you need to understand here is, right? So there is something called as the feedback loop. So you have the say cryosphere melting. Now as the cryosphere melts, there is more say methane emissions at the permafrost regions. So this is where actually thousands of years permafrost was trapped. Now once this methane emissions permafrost was trapped, that will lead to more amount of warming of temperatures. This warming of temperature will lead to more cryosphere melting or the ice melting. This is what we call it as the feedback loops. Feedback loops. And another thing which you can also talk about is the albedo. If not this, there is something also about another one, albedo impact. Now what happens? You all know that if there is snow, if there is things like this white color, you can talk about the ice. That ice will reflect more amount of sunlight. Why do you think that polar regions have less temperatures? It is always because of two reasons. One, because of the tilt of the, one because of the slant rays which we receive from the sun, which they receive very less, and whatever they receive, majority would be reflected back because of the dominance of ice. Because ice reflects, we all know, If you have a white color shirt, it is very easy for us to wear it in summer. Whereas it is a dark color shirt, difficult to wear in summer because dark absorbs, whereas ice reflects. Now what is happening is, because of the cryosphere melting, the ice is lost. So albedo is increasing. Now albedo levels are varied, and this is also leading to a warming of the temperatures there. So in other words, all these things are finally doing what? They're actually causing a loss of so much amount of what do you say? I lost, and which is causing so many disasters. And this cryosphere and such kind of things which I'm trying to talk are all this part of something called it as climate change feedback mechanisms. Now we need to study about all these things to have how our earth is impacted by our man-made emissions or the man-made catastrophic impacts. So these feedback are important in understanding the climatic change because they play an important part in determining the sensitivity of the climate to warming forces. At what rate are we? At what rate is climate change is happening? At what rate it is happening? How it will impact us? How it will impact us? Such things we need to study. And because of these kind of things put together, the large positive feedbacks can lead to tipping points. Understand what do you mean by tipping point? Tipping point is a point where beyond that, by then we have caused such a damage which cannot be reversed now. We have caused irreversible damage beyond which you cannot change it again. For example, when we get into the cycle of such kind of climate change phenomena, after we talk about when the global climate is reaching around more than 2.5 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius, we never know how the earth would change. The catastrophic impact of climate change would be very severe by then. That is what one of the things. So this is what we call it as irreversible changes. For example, the loss of biodiversity. Such things, they can actually change the nature like anything. So this is what is called it as climate change feedback mechanisms. Then this is the catastrophics. These feedbacks will lead to all these kind of things which will directly impact us. Then moving further, these catastrophes of cryosphere are not just found at the melting of the glaciers, which may lead to so much amount of loss of certain things. It is also about the things like cryosphere emissions in terms of, say, the cryosphere loss in the Himalayas. Say, I think you heard about a certain thing called black carbon. Black carbon. Now, because of incomplete burning, which you find in the plains of India, there are some particles which are there in the atmosphere. Black carbon formed out of incomplete combustion. Then, such kind of particles which are there in the air, that transferring this incomplete combustion, say via winds, they're transferring these winds, the winds are transferring these black carbon combustions into the Himalayan region. Now, what is the characteristic of black carbon? Black carbon is like a greenhouse gas. It traps the heat. Because it acts like a greenhouse gas, it is trapping the heat. It is leading to increase in the melting of glaciers. So nature is trap the heat. So the impact is glacier melt. So the Himalayan glaciers, the Gangotri, Yamunotri glaciers of India are melting out because of this black carbon emissions, and that is leading to so much amount of consequences. And because of such consequences, we are seeing so many disasters. I hope you are following, all of you, right? I hope you are following. Okay, yes. Now, what is the simple thing? There are certain particles which are emitted by our man-made activities, say through incomplete combustion. There is a material called black carbon which is released. This black carbon is like a greenhouse gas. It is transferred by the winds of the plains towards the Himalayas. As it is transferred to the Himalayas, what is happening there? you are finding that when this black carbon is deposited on the melting of the glaciers, it is leading to variations of albedo. So the albedo is reduced. Because the albedo is reduced, it might lead to impact of glacier melting, which will lead to flooding. I think we are already seeing this phenomena called glacial lake outburst flood. Glacial lake outburst flood. Because of glacial lake outburst flood, there are so many disasters happening in the regions of Himalayas frequently, and that is leading to a loss of that is leading to flooding, that is leading to say things like landslides and all, and it is also impact in the longer run in terms of the water supply to our northern plains. Keeping all this into considerations, there were so many studies which were conducted, and one such scheme which government of India is studying about the entire cryosphere, be it on the ground level, be it in terms of the Antarctic and the Arctic region, everywhere together, there is a scheme which is started called PACER scheme, which talks about polar science and cryosphere research. It amalgamates various polar programs including Antarctic and Arctic research. Implemented the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research. Implemented by the National Center for Polar and the Ocean Research, which it includes 4 major elements. What are they? The Antarctic program, the Indian Arctic program, the Southern Ocean program, the Cryosphere and the Climate program. You see the Antarctic program, which studies about how the West Asian Antarctic, like the Thwaites Glacier and all, are losing and how it is having a huge impact. You can have the Indian Arctic program, which studies about how the Arctic ice is melting and how it is also providing opportunity for us in the present way of having good tie-ups with respect to the oil and the permafrost with respect to in the permafrost regions, exploration of oil with Russia and all. And similarly, the Southern Ocean program, it talks about the Southern Ocean, they're on the Antarctic region as such, and also the Cryosphere and the Climatic program, which is encompasses of all these things. Now, as you study about all these things, you will get to know about how the climate change is happening, the cryosphere, the ice is losing, and what changes we need to bring so that there is a better world. What changes we need to bring? We have to stop climate change prevention. How? We have to make it sure that the Paris Agreement is met. How? By the targets which we are doing. You remember the Panchamrit targets of India? Be it in terms of reducing the carbon intensity, the footprints of every industry, shift towards the electric vehicles, promoting afforestation, preventing the present deforestation, promoting afforestation schemes which can increase the carbon dioxide, which can suck out the carbon dioxide from the oxygen from the atmosphere, right? The carbon sequestration things, the clean coal technologies which can have reduction in the which can increase the efficiency of coal, which can reduce the impact of climate change. All these things has to be done so that ultimately the cryosphere is protected, right? Once you protect this cryosphere, then you will find the things. I hope you all have understood, right? So one important announcement I'm trying to tell you is I wanted to have a doubt session, which I can create a doubt session. If directed communication between you and me via Google Meet, we can have a doubt session where I'll be posting when we will have a doubt session where you can interact with me directly via Telegram channel, so that whatever the doubts are there in terms of your UPSC preparation or any particular doubt about the geographical things and all, or any in your approach, just to have a certain feedback, I can have a meet. Say, I will try to provide you the time and all where you can have the doubt session. You can interact with me, have doubts, have your issues resolved, so that ultimately you can learn out of that and move forward. Okay, right? So for that, you can get into my Telegram channel, download it. You can scan with the QR code. You can get into the channel, or you can simply type, be it Venkatesh Sir Textbook or Venkatesh Sir Geographical Voyage, which is the name of the channel. You can get into it and you can directly interact with me. Hope you all have understood this, right? So until we meet next time, have a good time, learn well. This is Venkatesh signing off. Happy learnings. Jai Hind all of you. Thank you.